record this for everybody. So my name is Jeremy Adams. I'm very excited to be doing this presentation for all of you guys who are either going to hopefully eventually watch this, or for some people who are going to be joining us as we go. I'm excited to be asked to do a master class. I don't consider myself to be a master much of anything. So I'm honored to be here. Absolutely honored. So here's what I plan on doing tonight. So I'm going to be doing my presentation about how to get what we call a big book contract from a publisher. I'm going to keep the chat box open, so if people have questions, they are more than welcome to type it in. At the very end of my presentation, if people want to unmute themselves, that's fine as well. But again, I'm very excited to be here. Again, I am not great at the technology, so I'm going to try and share my screen here right now, and hopefully be able to work my way through this. So hopefully you guys see this right now. And let me see if I can get the chat going here, just in case anybody happens to jump in there. So again, my name is Jeremy Adams, and I'm excited to be doing a masterclass on how to land a big publisher for your book. First of all, let me introduce myself. So I've been a teacher from Bakersfield, California for 24 years. I'm one of these people who graduated from college in June and was right into the classroom 2 months later in August of 1998. As if that weren't enough, I was actually hired to teach at the very high school where I graduated from. So I know that for those of you guys who eventually watch this, you're going to be thinking, you look way too young to have been a teacher for 24 years, but alas, that's how long I've been teaching. And so that's my main gig. That's what I always want to do. I plan on being a 40-year teacher. I'm one of these people who retires with a nice big California retirement, because I plan on going for 40 years. That being said, the reason I'm here tonight, though, has nothing to do, of course, with my teaching. It has to do with my writing. And so what I want to do is I want to share with you a bit of my journey, because it has been quite a journey. And one of the things that you notice is that when you've been a teacher for about 10 or 15 years, you start to think to yourselves, what's the next chapter of my career going to look like? The most common second route is for people to go and get their master's degrees, and they get their administrative credentials, or they get their EDDs. So they think about being a dean or a vice principal or a superintendent or something like that. And the truth of the matter is, I've never had any interest, zilch, zero, the big donut hole, of ever being an administrator. I love my students, and I love my subject, and I love my classroom. So the only thing I ever really wanted to be was a teacher. But I also have a passion for books and for writing and for spirited conversation about the really important things in our society, and specifically going on in our schools. And so, I started to write quite a bit about education and about politics and about things of this nature. And one of the things that I learned along the way is that it's better to start early, right? And it's better to definitely have a forum for all of this writing. So where I am today, just if you want to look at the PowerPoint here, you'll see that I've now written 4 books on education and teaching. The very first one is at the bottom there. It's called Full Classrooms, Empty Selves. And then a few years later, I was able to be published at a kind of a larger publisher, and it's called The Secrets of Timeless Teachers. A few years later, the Riding the Wave book came out. And then finally, my big book from last summer that eventually became an Amazon best-selling book is called Hollowed Out. And so those are my books. Again, I'm going to talk all about them here in just a few minutes. But I've also been very fortunate to be published in a lot of different places when it comes to opinion pieces. So I've been published in Newsweek and the LA Times, the Washington Post, the Washington Times, Quillette. Obviously, the Educator Room is my home. And we're going to talk about the importance of having a writing home, because it's absolutely essential. So that's essentially kind of my resume, if you will, of books and places to write. And so how did we get from just the classroom and kind of a minor interest in writing to this desire to land a big time contract and get published by a huge publisher and get on a bestseller list. How did that happen? So that's really what I want to talk about tonight, because again, I'm a teacher who writes. I'm not a writer who teaches. I want to be very, very clear about that. I'd love to have an even more successful writing and speaking career. Who wouldn't? But I'm actually surprised at how well it's gone thus far. So when Fran asked me to give this masterclass, that's really what she wanted me to talk about. So let's start off with kind of the elephant in the room, which is, how do you win a big publishing contract? How does that happen? Okay, now, first of all, big is a relative word. Big to me is definitely would not be the same thing as what's big to Malcolm Gladwell or Barack Obama. Okay, so when we're talking about a big publishing contract, I think we mean a contract to write a book before you've written it, and something that gives you a few $1,000s in your pockets up front. That would be a big publishing contract to me. And again, we're going to get to that point here in just a few minutes. But before we do that, I want to talk about the fact that there are a number of lanes that are available for getting a quote unquote big publishing contract. The problem is, if I'm being completely honest with everybody out there, the problem is they're not available to 99.99999% of the population. So let's just kind of be completely honest. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. What are some of the fast lanes? If you want to get a big publishing contract, what are the fast lanes? Well, the biggest one by far is to already be famous. Okay, I always get really, really, really resentful sometimes of people who are already famous and they just decide on a whim to write a book. And you know that they're not writing the book. You know that they have a ghostwriter. You know they're hiring somebody to do it. Politicians do it. Even professional writers do it. Heck, so if you are somebody who already is a household name, if you are if you are Billie Eilish, or you are Ted Cruz, or you are Anthony Fauci, or Danielle Steele, you're going to get a contract. That's not a question, right? And so one thing is to simply already be famous. This is something I kind of learned the hard way, is that if you want to get a contract and if you want to sell a lot of books, 99% of the work is to be famous already. And so to kind of demonstrate this, I decided to kind of to really, and again, not trying to be negative, but here's the truth. So I decided to just pick a random week in late May of this year, right? Of last year, May of 2021, right? And so when you look at the top 10 best-selling books, and again, just so we're all clear, my focus tonight is on nonfiction, right? I assume these are other writers in the educators room. These are other teachers who are interested in having books published. So I want to be very useful. So my focus is really on nonfiction tonight. I probably should have said that at the very beginning. So here are some writers from the top 10, okay? So obviously you have Matthew McConaughey, who I frankly think I look like. Whenever I look in the mirror, I'm like, is that Jeremy or is that Matthew McConaughey? I really can't tell. Okay, I'm trying to be funny. I don't know if anybody's actually listening to this, but Matthew McConaughey wrote a best-selling book. Then the bottom, you have the wonderful Oprah, right? And then you have the guy in the left there who wrote The Big Short. He's written numerous bestsellers. You have Elizabeth Warren, the senator from Massachusetts who ran for president. You have Malcolm Gladwell. You have Bill O'Reilly. All of these names, Malcolm Gladwell, Matthew McConaughey, Bill O'Reilly. These are people who were already famous. Now, except for Malcolm Gladwell, none of them are famous for being good writers, right? None of them are famous for the actual prose that are coming off of their computer screens, right? So again, the number one way to get a big book contract and to be a bestseller is to already be a famous person. I wish that weren't the case. I wish that weren't true, but sadly that is. So if you're already famous, you're there. But if you're not famous and you still want to publish a book, stay with me, because what I'm going to tell you will come in handy here. I promise. Okay, so here's the second one. Another thing is if you already have a built-in audience. The term that a lot of students use nowadays is they talk about being an influencer, right? Talking about somebody who has a gazillion followers on Instagram or Snapchat or Facebook or Twitter. You're already somebody who publishes a newsletter. This is Atomic Habits book, which has just gone, is a bonanza of sales, right? So it's sold millions of copies. He already had, and it's a great book, by the way, too. It's one of the best self-help books I've encountered in a long, long time. But he already had a newsletter with tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people already, right? He had that platform already built in. Same thing with Brene Brown. Here's somebody who, she could literally write gibberish. She could write the worst book in the world, and she doesn't. She writes great books, but she could write the worst book in the world, and I guarantee it's going to be on the New York Times bestselling list. Why? Because she has a built-in audience. She already has a platform. They have a gazillion followers, either on social media or through their newsletters or whatever. So if you already have a built-in audience, again, that's also a really great way to be able to eventually win a contract. I didn't have that. I did not have a built-in audience. When I started on this path towards getting a book contract, I was kind of a nobody. I still am pretty much a nobody, maybe just a small little somebody else than I was 5 years ago. But so if you are today kind of where I was 5 or 6 years ago, you are neither of these people, right? You are not Matthew McConaughey as much as you might want to be. I sure as heck do want to be. You're probably not James Clear or Brene Brown. You are probably this person right here, right? So here's my question. What if you aren't famous? I wasn't famous. I'm not famous. You don't have a huge following. I don't even have 1,000 people following me on Twitter to this day. So that's definitely me. And so in short, what if you are a normal person with publishing dreams, right? And so I figure the people who are watching this right now or who are going to watch it are people who are normal, everyday people, but they really feel like they have something important and powerful and potent to say, something that is, perhaps inspiring or something that needs to be said. And so you have your own publishing dreams. And so really what I want to talk about here for the next 45 minutes or so really is for you, people who are normal, but you have a dream of getting a book published. And so how do you go about doing that? If it does happen, how does it happen, right? So that's really my focus is not number one or number two. I'm assuming you're not famous. I'm assuming you don't have a platform. What if you're a normal person and you have publishing dreams? So that's my audience today. So here's the first thing I really want to emphasize to everybody who's watching this. The most important thing is you have to write a lot, like a lot. And that's the case for a few reasons. Number one, the more you write, obviously the better you're going to get. If I'm being perfectly honest with you, I want you guys to look at this. If you look at this slide here, you'll notice that I have the educator's room as the first one, right? And I have actually gone back and done this. I believe my very first article that I ever wrote for the educator's room was about, is social media imperiling, is it imperiling kind of civics education? That was 10 years ago. Now, I don't know if any of you ever go back and do this, and I probably shouldn't, but I go back and I sometimes read my stuff from 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 years ago. And I'll be honest, some of it I'm like, it kind of makes me cringe a little bit. It's what my 11-year-old says, it's cringy. And I look at it and I think, oh my gosh, I am so much better now than I was 10 years ago or even 5 or 6 years ago. But the only reason why that's the case is because I just kept on writing and writing and writing. And that's why it's really important to find a platform to write. I will be forever grateful if you read, for all my interviews. Here's my hollowed out book, right? In every single book I publish, I don't know if you guys know this or not, every single book I've ever had published, except for the first one, I always thank the amazing Fran Warren. I always thank the educator's room. To be perfectly honest with you, I'm probably one of the more conservative writers that they have, even though I consider myself to be pretty middle of the road, especially by modern standards. I'm very middle. But it didn't matter if what I wrote was conservative or liberal or about, what part of education. the educators room always allowed me to use that space to figure out what worked and to figure out what didn't work. The other thing I love about the educators room, and Fran, and she's probably blushing when she's going to hear this, but I love the fact that she's not territorial. If you have other places where you want to submit, she encourages that. So for a few years, I was kind of taking turns between the educators room and the Huffington Post. And the Huffington Post had this really great thing where, you would ask to be a contributor, and sometimes they would invite you. And I was really lucky. For about 3 years, they had this kind of public, they would invite normal everyday people to be contributors. And so for a lot of years, I was writing articles for the educators room and for the Huffington Post, about one or two a month or so. And the really neat thing about a platform like the educators room or even the Huffington Post is not only does it allow you to practice your craft, you've got to write a lot to get good at it. You really do. But the second thing is, you never know what's going to go crazy. You never know what's going to go viral, I think is the term that people use. And what's so frustrating to me, and I know I've talked to a lot of writers about this, is how crazy unpredictable it is. Sometimes I will write something and I think, ain't nobody's going to read this. This is really for me because I'm frustrated or I'm annoyed. I'm just trying to figure out what I'm thinking, so I'm writing about it. Nobody's going to read this. And then the article goes nuts, right? And it has a gazillion shares, and you hear from the haters, and all of that comes out of the woodwork. And then sometimes you think, I got a great idea. 1 million people are going to read this. I'm going to be famous by next week. And then nobody gives a crap. Nobody reads it. You're like, man, well, that was disappointing, right? And so, if you don't write it, it's definitely not going to, it's not going to be well read, right? So you have to write to get better. You have to write to be read. And really what you need to understand is when you start kind of smaller, when you start on smaller platforms, that kind of allows you to scaffold to better opportunities. And when I say better, I don't mean that it's superior, but it's just a name that people recognize. So I remember, kind of the first big break I had beyond the educators room and the Huffington Post was when the Washington Post was sometimes taking some educator room articles and reposting them on the answer sheet. I think there's something sheet is what the Washington Post has as their education page. And I had 2 articles early on that got republished there, and they went nuts. And so a lot of people read some of my work that I'd written on the educators room, but it eventually made its way to the Washington Post, right? And then eventually, after many years of rejection, I eventually got asked to write for the LA Times a few times. So I've been in the LA Times, I think 3 or 4 times now. That's the second or third biggest newspaper in the country. Okay, but again, you have to start from somewhere. Very rarely do you just write an opinion piece and boom, the LA Times is going to say, "Hey, we want to publish that." It takes a lot of years of writing and submitting, but it's always nice to have a medium, someplace, a home where you can continue to publish, no matter how crazy or silly or important or obscure the topic might be. Right now. So that's the first one, is you've got to write and you've got to find a platform. Some people do Substack, some people find their own platforms. I like to use other people's platforms because I find that it's easier for the article to get out there. If I'm writing on, the Huffington Post or the Educators Room or, the Newsweek or something, clearly a lot more people are going to read that than if it's just me blogging on my own. So that's the first thing. So make sure you write a lot and find a platform. But here's the thing, and I want to make sure you guys understand this. Everybody who's at the very beginning of a writing journey hears this, but I don't think anybody really believes it. And when you start this process of writing and submitting, and I don't mean to your home, because I know and that the educators room is going to publish what you write, right? They're trying to create content. They recruited you or asked you to write for them because they think that you're up to the task. So I don't mean a place that's kind of your publishing home. I'm talking about reaching. I'm talking about submitting to places that have editorial discretion in a way that makes them very choosy, right? So when I submit to the LA Times or to USA Today or Newsweek or the Wall Street Journal or Quillette or the Washington Post or any of these places, you have to understand that your chances of being accepted are infinitely small. And what's really annoying is that most of the time, you don't even get a rejection. You don't even get a no. They say, we'll give you a week, and if you don't hear back from us, we didn't want it. And so that's the thing that's really, really upsetting is, if you have like a dartboard and it's really, really small, you're going to have to throw a gazillion darts for the hope that one ever gets accepted, right? And so what's interesting is, obviously the more you write, the better your stuff's going to be. So that increases your chance. But the second thing is when you submit to places that have kind of a national name to them, and you say, well, look, hey, I've been published in the LA Times before. I've been published in Newsweek. I've been published in Quillette, right? When you can say that, they do look a little bit, more frequently at what you have to say. And so really what I'm trying to teach you guys how to do here is really build up that writing resume, right? So you start with, hey, I'm a frequent contributor to the Educators Room, right? And then hopefully at some point you can use kind of your experience there to go somewhere else. And you might have to submit for years. I submitted to the LA Times probably 2 or 3 times a year for 17 years. I never got through. I never got through to them, ever. And then finally, one day they decided they liked a piece. And then I've written, I think, 2 more pieces for them. Now, they still don't like everything I've written them. Sometimes I send something and, about half the time they still say no. But the fact that I know who to contact, that's very helpful, right? So then I can say, well, now I've written for the LA Times. And so now I'm going to try and submit to this person or that person. Now, to this day, I still get rejected all the time. Nobody ever writes me back. Like, I still would love to get published in the Wall Street Journal. It's never happened. Never even gotten a whiff of it. I would love to be published in USA Today. Never even a whiff of it. Obviously, I'd love to be published in the New York Times. Never even gotten a whiff of it, right? So again, the only way to ever be successful is to keep submitting. And one thing that I might suggest is write something that both the Educators Room would like and maybe some of these other places would like. One of the things that I would do sometimes is I'd say, okay, I'm going to try and submit this to, I'm going to try and get the Washington Post to do this, or maybe the LA Times would take it, or whoever. But if they don't, I know that, the Educators Room would like it too. And sometimes, the biggest articles I ever wrote for the Educators Room were pieces that other people passed on. Like, they didn't even say a word about them, and yet they did really well in the Educators Room, and that always kind of makes me very happy. So try and write pieces that are catered, that would work in a few different places, but just get ready for a mountain of rejection, and that's going to happen at many steps of the way on this journey towards publication. So make sure you write a lot, make sure you have a home, make sure you get ready for a ton of rejection. But here's the next thing that you need to figure out, right? And this is really, really important. If you want to publish a book, if you want to publish a book, you have to figure out, first of all, is the goal to be published? Like, do I just want to see my name on a book that's essentially been written by somebody who has written on a subject that I think is really, really important? Or do I want to sell a bunch of books, right? Because sometimes, sadly, they're very different journeys, right? So either I really want to aim for a book and I want to make sure it's in print, or do I just really want to have a lot of sales? And so it's kind of 2 different journeys you have to take there, right? So let's start off here with, let's say you just want to make sure you get a book published, that let's say you've been writing for the Educators Room, or you've been writing, maybe you have a popular blog or a Substack, whatever. If you feel like it's time for a book, here are the different steps you should take. So first of all, most publishers do not require an agent. They will allow you to directly contact them, and that's really, really important. So, figure out what subject it is you want to publish. Presumably, this is a bunch of teachers and a bunch of educators. And so the good thing is there's a lot a lot of educational publishers out there. So find a publisher who has written the kind of book that you aspire to write. Okay. And again, you're going to want to find a handful of those publishers out there. Okay. So that's the first thing. Second thing, once you kind of figured out, okay, well, I really want to submit a proposal to that publishing house and that publishing house and that publishing house. Once you've done that, then it's time to actually start on the book proposal. Now, I cannot emphasize this enough. If you want to write a book that a publishing house accepts, the proposal has to be quick. It has to be spot on. They have to find your interest absolutely immediately. So the most important thing you should do is find proposals of friends who have done it. Again, you can always contact me. I'll always give you a copy of my proposals that have worked. Look online. There's so many great materials, but you have to find examples of proposals because it's not innate knowledge. You have to know, how do you structure it? What kind of things are they looking for? What headings do they want? How much of a sample do they want? So typically, what does a proposal include? It typically includes an overview, right? It typically includes a kind of a one-sentence description. It includes you describing kind of what's the genre, who is your competition, who is your audience, what is your marketing plan. They always want a table of contents, and then they usually want to have a few sample chapters. And I would argue it's really important for you to have the introduction of your book written and then 2 sample chapters. It doesn't matter if it's the last 2 chapters of the book, the middle 2, one from the beginning, one from the end, it doesn't matter. But you have to have that introduction and then 2 of the body chapters written as a part of your proposal, right? So again, there are lots of different ways to structure a proposal, and there's no one right way, but there are certain things that every proposal includes, and that's essentially what I've talked about here today. Okay, so the next step is once you've created the proposal, once you've done the introduction and the chapters, I'm telling you right now, you want to send them your absolute best work. Make sure you have some friends who are writers. Make sure, hopefully you can find some family members, some colleagues who will be honest with you. Again, 10 years ago, I kind of didn't want to hear criticism. I just wanted people to tell me how much they loved my writing and how insightful it was and how great it was. And you're so right, Jeremy. And it's interesting because now when I'm writing a proposal or something, I don't want to hear that. I want to know what are the weaknesses, because the goal is not for me to feel good. The goal is to get published. The goal is to find a publisher. And I don't want people to tell me how good it is and then not tell me what I need to change in order to reach the goal that I have, right? So you have to revise. You have to get people to be really, really honest with you. And once you've done that, once you've found maybe 5 or 6 publishers who publish the kind of book that you want to have, who will take proposals directly from the author, and you send it in, then you just have to hold your breath. If you're like me, and I'm kind of embarrassed to admit this, whenever I would give in a proposal, I would become absolutely obsessed with my email. I would check my email, probably 40 times a day, waiting for a publisher to kind of get back to me and to tell me yes or no. I mean, it was almost always no, by the way. But that's the way it works if you want to go directly to a publisher, right? Now, so how did that work for me? Well, I had a proposal for a book that I had in mind. The first book I ever wrote was a kind of a memoir, and it was published by a really small publishing house, almost like self-published. I didn't do it, this other guy did it for me, and it was got his small little project. So the first book was kind of a really, really small publisher. But what happened was there was a lady who got a hold of that book and really loved it. And she worked for a huge professional development company called Solution Tree. And she said, if Solution Tree is huge. They would absolutely, your writing is definitely good enough for them. You love to talk about teaching. You love to give speeches. You'd be perfect for professional development. So what happened was I had an idea for a professional development book. And the idea was, I think sometimes in education, and this is one of my hobby horses is that education becomes very trendy, really, really trendy. We always take the latest trend and we think that it's the solution, it's the panacea, it's, it's the holy grail that we've been waiting for. And I think that's a really bad habit, by the way, because I think great teaching really doesn't change that much over time. So I wanted to write a book about what I called timeless teaching. And the title of the book was The Secrets of Timeless Teachers. What are the habits and the behaviors and, what are the things that the best teachers do in every generation, no matter how old the students are, no matter what they're teaching, no matter where you are in the world. There are a few things that great teachers always have in common. I wanted to write a book about that. What are those secrets that made somebody a great teacher 2,000 years ago and would make them a great teacher today? And so I wrote that book for this huge publisher called Solution Tree. And I wrote that proposal and I had really high hopes. I remember because Solution Tree was a huge publisher and I really believed in this project, and it took them months. They did a thorough review of it. And I remember getting the email where they said no. They said they loved the writing, but they didn't think it was really exactly what it is they publish. And so he's like, I'd love to get you to write a book for us someday, but it's just not this one. We're gonna have to say no. But he said, I have a friend and another publisher who I think might be interested in it. And so he gave me his name, introduced us via email. And so then I kind of changed the proposal to this other publisher called Rowman and Littlefield. Rowman and Littlefield is a great publisher. They publish, they are a behemoth. They publish thousands of books a year on politics and education and history and economics and race relations and foreign policy. And you name it, they publish books on. So they publish a gazillion books a year. And he said, I think that in their education, they would probably like this book. And so I redid the proposal. I gave it to Rowman and Littlefield. And I remember about 2 weeks later, they accepted the proposal. So that next summer, I wrote The Secrets of Timeless Teachers. I publicized it as much as I could. I ended up going around, I talked about 7 or 8 districts about it. I think it sold, over 1,000 copies. Remember, 95% of books in America sell less than 500 copies. It's extraordinary. Let me say that again. 95% of all books in America sell less than 500 copies. So the fact that The Secrets of Timeless Teachers sold, I think, 1,000 to 1,500 books was huge. That was a huge number for me. And so that was, more of a success than I thought it could be. And so then I kind of took that and I went back to Solution Tree a few years later and said, okay, you guys said you wanted to write a book. I think I have another idea. I think I know now kind of more what you guys publish. And I decided, I want to write a book about the fact that, and by the way, this was all before COVID. So don't think that I'm just like kind of stealing COVID ideas. I wanted to write a book about the fact that teachers are constantly having to deal with these waves of changes, right? Changes to society, changes to the pedagogy, changes to the curriculum, changes to the expectations. The kids are changing, the parenting styles are changing, whatever. The politics of our society around us are changing. And, so I wrote a book called Riding the Wave, about the fact that as a teacher, you kind of stand at the water's edge. And what's going to happen is these waves of change are coming over you all the time. And either you're going to be destroyed by these waves, they're going to wash over you and disorient you, and you're going to be unhappy, or you need to find a way to kind of ride those waves and be a successful teacher. And so I wrote a very practical book about how teachers can embrace the change of their profession and how instead of harming our relationships, can actually help our relationships. And so Solution Tree said yes. They decided to publish the book. I had high hopes that it was going to then lead to a bunch of workshops and professional development. And the book was released in early April of 2020. And I don't know if any of you guys know that date, but really the COVID lockdowns began just a week and a half before that. And nobody was in the mood for professional development. Nobody was in the mood for talking about education books. And so that was a really, really, really big disappointment, because I thought that book was really going to make waves, no pun intended, right? But at the same time, as I was writing these books about professional development, I also had dreams of writing a popular book. And when I say a popular book, what I mean is not the kind of book you would buy for professional development, right? A book that you would just read, like a Malcolm Gladwell book or a political commentary book, right? Something that makes a big argument about a big issue in society that hopefully sells thousands of copies. And so, if you want that kind of a book, if you want a book by Scribner, or if you want to get a book from Viking, or if you want to be published by Random House, or if you want to be published by any of these, what we call the 5 or 6, big time New York publishers, you're going to have to get an agent, right? You're going to absolutely have to get an agent. And so this is kind of the second path. How do you write a really popular book, right? So at any rate, if you want to do that, then you're going to have to get an agent, and that is a grueling process, if I'm being honest with you. And in many ways, it's very similar to trying to get a publisher, in the sense that, instead of, you're not trying to get anybody to publish your book, you're trying to get somebody to represent your book. Because what I've learned is that agents are the ultimate gatekeepers. They are the ultimate gatekeepers. They don't get paid unless you get an offer and you sell books. So agents are really, 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 really picky about the kinds of projects they take on, right? That very few of them are ever going to take on a writer or a project that they just believe in it because it's a nice message. That they need to know that, no, there's a publishing house that's going to pay $5,000 up front, or $10,000 up front, or $50,000 up front for this book. And there's a good chance that this book is going to sell thousands of copies. And so again, an agent wants to make sure that a book is going to sell, right? And so what you need to do is, in your proposal, is you need to sell them on the idea that this is the kind of book that is going to have an audience. It's going to have, essentially some legs, and it's going to get out there. And so if you're going to get an agent, here are some of the things that you're going to need, right? So the first things I've said before is you're going to have some writing credits. And this is where the only way I was ever able to get an agent was because I could say, look at these 2 books I've already written on education. Look at all of these people who've read my articles at the Educators Room. Look at these people who've read my stuff in the Washington Post. Look at these people who've read my stuff on the Huffington Post. And so the reason why I said that stuff earlier about getting a lot of credits is because you have to have those when you make your proposal to an agent. You have to show them, absolutely have to show them that, a lot of people have read your stuff, other people have wanted to publish your stuff, and that you're worthy of their belief and their faith in you, right? Second thing, if you've already written a book before, I had written some books before, you want to have your previous sales. Now, my books were not bestsellers because they were professional development books, right? So especially my last one, Riding the Wave, had almost no sales at the time because it came out in the beginning of COVID, right? So it probably didn't have 200 copies when I was trying to get an agent. So that was really, really, really disheartening. And the last thing you want to put in this proposal is you want to be able to explain how powerful you are at promotion, and how you're going to get out there, and the interviews you're going to give, and you have friends who will review the book, and you have contacts. Honestly, I mean, again, I wish I could tell you that the most important thing for a proposal was the part of the proposal where you did the introduction and the 2 sample chapters, and you could show what a great and splendid and extraordinary writer you were, how your prose just jumps off the page, and how remarkable you are with the written word. It's just not true. The number one thing you can do is to show how good you would be at promotion, to show that you have a plan for selling this book. And that's why I said, number 3 right there is, if you're not famous and you don't have a huge platform and you haven't already sold a lot of books, this is going to require a fair amount of luck. And I'm willing to tell you right now that when I eventually got my agent, so let's talk about that a little bit. So again, my agent was a former teacher, so I got a little bit of luck on that. She was interested in my book, which eventually became Hollowed Out. Again, it's probably a little bit more of a conservative book than a lot of my friends here at the Educators Room would probably like, but it was about the fact that a lot of the habits and the values and the relationships and the institutions that tend to give people a sense of meaning and purpose in their lives, marriage and children and faith and love of country and friendships and passions and all of these things being very active in life. A lot of these things that kind of tend to give people a very strong sense of their of purpose and human flourishing is just simply missing from the kind of everyday experience of young Americans. And that's why they're, by far the most unhappy generation in history. And so, I wanted to write a book about that. And I saw this in the classroom. I saw a lot of unhappiness. I saw a lot of despair. Now, I saw a lot of young people who didn't believe in love. They don't believe in the country. They really aren't very good at friendship. They don't have any school spirit. So they're, a very unhappy generation. And I was worried about it. And I wanted to write a book about it. And my agent thought it was a great idea and thought most of all, that's the kind of book that typically gets written by a famous person, somebody who's, works for the New York Times or, they teach at the Ivy League or whatever. But she thought that it was an advantage that I was a teacher, that I was actually in the classroom with the very topics and the very things and the subjects that I was writing about. But she said, because she is an agent and she wants to make money, her point was, Jeremy, I will take this on, but you need to find a famous person to write a forward. We all know what a forward is. It's kind of like, it's a brief little 2-page intro kind of. And of course, I'm a high school teacher and I don't know anybody famous. So, I tried to get my congressman to help me find somebody. And at the end of the day, I couldn't find a famous person to write a forward for me. I couldn't do it. And so I went back to her and I said, I'm sorry. I don't have anybody. I thought I had a lead. They thought they were going to help me. They ended up saying they couldn't help me. So I understand if you don't want to take on the project, because I am a nobody. I have some decent credits, but I don't really have a history of publishing in huge places. And I haven't sold, 10,000 books or anything. So I get it. And she decided that she wanted to go ahead with the project anyhow. That she's like, no, I do believe in this. And I think she's like, I really believe in the importance of the subject, the quality of the writing. And I think maybe you not being famous is a good thing. Because even though you're not famous, you're pretty articulate. You like to talk. You like to have conversations with people. You don't get, you don't mind publicizing things, and you don't get nervous in front of crowds. So, we'll go forward. And so I signed with her, and I finally had an agent who was, I've been running to write Hollowed Out for many, many years. And so she took it on. And so she started to give it to all of these big publishers in the country. And so I want to tell you then kind of this, I think it's a sad, sad soap opera story. But I want to tell you about the fact that I landed a huge book deal. Then I lost it. And then I got a deal again. So that's going to be kind of how I end, the last 10, 15 minutes here of our master class here. So in the spring of 2019, she started submitting to a lot of publishers. There are a lot of publishers in this country. Some of them are humongous, some of them are smaller. But there's a lot of money to be made in the publishing world. A lot of people think that Americans don't read books anymore. And while fewer and fewer Americans do read, less than they used to, there's still a lot of money to be made in publishing. So she submitted to over 40 publishers in the spring of 2019. And every time she got a rejection, she would forward it to me. And so what I got was essentially a lot of really nice rejection notes over and over and over again. And I kept hearing the same thing. It's the same thing I'm telling you, which was essentially this idea that love the subject. I think it's important. Love the messenger. I think it's great that he's a high school teacher and he can, has this message and they so well. That's great. But at the end of the day, I kept getting rejections because they said, we just don't know how to sell it. He doesn't have 10,000 Twitter followers. He's not a name. He's never done anything famous. He's won some nice teaching awards, but nothing, he's not the national teacher of the year or anything. So, we just keep getting passed over and over and over and over again. And so finally she said, Jeremy, I gave it my all. I tried. I just couldn't find anybody who actually would commit to it. And so she'd given up on it, which I'd given up too. And a few months later, she was having lunch with a friend of hers. And that friend said, what kind of books are you trying to sell right now? And she mentioned my book. And so the friend said, let me take a look at that proposal. And so she looked at it. And even though she didn't take up on it, she said, you know what, I think there's a few other places, maybe there's some more conservative publishers and maybe some religious presses that you should submit to that you didn't do before. And so my agent sent it off to 10 new publishers that she hadn't really sent it to before. And lo and behold, dun, 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 I actually got 2 offers for the Hollowed Out project. One of them was kind of a religious press, but it was very, very famous. It was called, it was essentially an imprint of HarperCollins. And then I was given one from a kind of a more conservative press as well. And so I was given 2 offers, which, I mean, to say that I was over the moon excited is an understatement. The largest offer was for $30,000 up front. And then the way that these contracts work is they give you a third of it when you sign the contract, and they give you another third of it when you turn in your manuscript, and then the last third is when it's published, right? So I got $10,000 up front, and then I got $10,000 after I turned it in, and then $10,000, in the weeks after it was published. And so I was absolutely over the moon. This was a huge national publisher. I don't want to say exactly who it was because for reasons that are going to become really obvious right now. But they give me $10,000 and I'm off to the races. My plan was to write it in the summer of 2020 and to turn it in at the end of summer vacation. I got started on the book way earlier because of COVID. I was able to start writing the book. And so, I really dug in March and I wrote all the way till August. And I remember I turned it in on August 3rd. And my editor was off on vacation. He wasn't, and he's a great guy. He was very, very positive and kind. And he was the one who decided to offer me this contract. So he was great. But he was off on vacation. So I finished the book. I emailed him. I'd given my heart and soul to this. I've been wanting to write this book for years. I'd been working on it for years. I'd been giving it everything I had for 8 months. And I finally turned it in. And I was so excited. I can't even tell you how excited I was. And then the day after I turned it in, I get an email from my agent, who's in New York. I'm in California. And she says, Jeremy, you need to give me a call immediately. So I called her and she said, well, your publisher is really freaked out about COVID. And they really want to streamline how many books they have coming out next summer. And so they've decided to cancel your contract. They're not going to publish your book. And so you're done. That's it. And you can keep the money we've given you, but that's it. And so it was absolutely devastating. It was a gut punch. It was, I can't tell you, I should probably not tell you that I cried, but I did quite a bit. Because I really did believe that, everything in my career had gone to this moment. That everything I had experienced, I thought I'd written, everything was to go into this book. This was actually my reason for being a teacher, was this book. That's what I felt. It was my magnum opus. And then it wasn't going to be published. And my agent said, Jeremy, I really think that we should go back to the other people who wanted your book. They wanted it too. Now, they didn't offer you anywhere close to $30,000. They offered you a lot less, but let's go see if they still want the book. And so she contacted their editor, who had said that he'd been interested in it. And they said that they still wanted it. So a month later, after I lost that contract, I got a new one for the same book. Now they wanted me to make quite a few changes, kind of make it a slightly different book than what I had turned in. But by September of 2020, I had a new contract in hand. And what's interesting is the book was published on August 3rd of this year, just 6 months ago. August 3rd, 2021, exactly 1 year to the day that I turned in the old manuscript that eventually got canceled. So I think that's hopefully the heavens telling me just to kind of stay firm, stay focused, it will be good, right? And so the book was published. Again, I don't want to give you, I could do a whole nother class about what that experience was like, having a book published by a big national publisher, going on national TV, going on radio, going on podcasts, writing like crazy. It was a crazy 3 or 4 weeks of publicity. It became an Amazon best-selling book. And I don't mean like a sub, everybody can write a best-selling book on Amazon because they have all these subcategories. It was actually a bestseller period. There were a few different days where it was in the top 350 in the whole country. So the book sold very, very well. And I'm actually thinking about a second big project with this same publisher now, kind of in the early days of that. We'll see if they want it. I don't know. My book was not a New York Times best-selling book. I wish it was, but again, it helps if you're already famous, which I'm not. So that is essentially the happy ending. And that's my journey. That's the way that I eventually got to where I am now. Again, I don't know if there's anybody out there. Again, I know we're mainly doing this, just recording it. We're going to post it later. If anybody has any questions in the chat box, now would be the time. But kind of, all of the questions that I typically get, I've tried to answer. Again, if anybody out there ever wants any help, please feel free to contact me. Fran knows how to do it. At this point, I guess I'm done. And I just want to thank everybody. So hope that's helpful. Good luck. Again, I guess I'll leave you with this is you have to absolutely believe in what you're saying and in yourself. If you don't have absolute, utter, unstoppable faith in the importance of what you're writing, then it's probably never going to happen to you. Again, you're going to be passed over. You're going to be told no. You're going to think that you're just kind of walking up a hill. Everybody has to walk up a mountain, and sometimes you get to the top of the mountain and it's not as glorious as you think it is. One of the things I learned, again, this is a whole nother topic. One of the things I learned about publishing a big national book is that there are, in fact, a lot of haters out there. There are people who will absolutely say awful things. So Madison, yeah, thank you so much for the kind words. And you know what? I love that term, life goal. It was a life goal for me. Again, I started writing at 23, and I really didn't have my first kind of big book. I didn't really have a national publisher until I was, almost 40 years old. Right, and it took me 10, 15 years of lots of rejection. So Madison, good luck. Absolutely believe in yourself. Anything I can do, please let me know. So good luck, everybody. Let me know if I can help you. And God bless everybody. Bye-bye.